Hey everybody, movie reviewer next door here, and I'm back with a review. And this time, I saw Close Range, and I've also got, for a clearer review, the Blu-ray. This is a 2015 martial arts action film directed by Isaac Florentine, and it stars Scott Adkins, Nick Chinland, Caitlin Keats, Madison Lawler, and Tony Perez. In this film, a rogue soldier turned outlaw is thrust into a relentless fight with a corrupt sheriff, his obedient deputies, and a dangerous drug cartel in order to protect his sister and her young daughter. So, what did I think of Close Range? Well, I've seen this film a couple times. This is yet another movie that I randomly saw on Amazon Prime back when I was younger, and this was my introduction to Scott Adkins. Now, if you haven't seen my other videos on Scott Adkins movies, then Scott Adkins is basically somebody who I definitely think he's one of the best action leading men in the past 2 decades. Because we really don't have any um, well built, tough guys anymore. You always got to be this little, like, oh, half politically correct, half kinda tough little bottom bitch. Then you get somebody like fucking Scott Adkins who can actually beat the fuck out of you and be imposing. Him, Gerard Butler, basically your Schwarzenegger, Stallone types. And yeah, I fully support Scott Adkins, and ever since I discovered him, I have always been happy with most of his films. I don't think I've hated one of his films yet. His most disappointing so far was probably Abduction, even though I don't even hate that movie. But I do need to watch more of his movies. But this is a pretty good film. The reason I don't say it's fantastic is it does have a few problems that do get in the way of it being a just straight up classic, but it has the action down 100%. But I'll get into that. Let me get to the cast. Scott Adkins as Colton McCready. He's basically a soldier. He ran away, um, and he's on the run from the law, but he helps bring his sister's daughter back from a drug cartel, and basically the drug cartel has come to collect her and a USB stick that they have. Scott Adkins is one of those actors that I can always watch because he's a good actor. I mean that. He can stand I think even if he was put in just a straight up comedy, I think he could do well because he does really good with the comedic one-liners and especially well with films with comedy in them, like Accident Man and Avengement, which were both dark comedies as well as being action or crime films. So I definitely think he's got the acting down as well, but where he really excels is his martial arts abilities. And his both that and his gun handling skills really work well together. And I do think that he is again trying to think of other action stars nowadays, but he might just be the best action star of the past decade or so. But damn, really there's not a lot of competition, but that doesn't mean anything less about him. He is fantastic here. He does a great job with the action, and he really sells it. Nick Chinland plays Sheriff Jesper Calloway. He's basically a dirty sheriff. He's on the cartel's payroll so that he can provide for his son, I guess. I guess he's kind of your secondary antagonist. Um, he's I like Nick Chinland. I've seen him before in films. He was the villain in Ultraviolet, that Mila Jovovich movie from Kurt Wimmer that got like taken away from him and re-edited, and the CG was unfinished, and people have been making fun of it for years. Um, I think he is a good secondary villain. He's a good actor. Um, he's really got the voice down. His voice is kind of terrifying at times. Caitlin Keats plays Angela Reynolds, who is Connor's sister. Um, For the most part, she's fine. She has some moments of not that great acting, but for the most part, she does fine, and she actually gets to do some shooting as well, and I'll get to that on why it works here. Sorry, my throat's a bit dry. Madison Lawler plays Haley Reynolds. She's the girl kidnapped by the cartel that Colton brings back. She's fine as well. She's a bit too. Whenever something slightly stressful is happening, she does this thing. She's like got her sleeves out super far, so they're like covering her hands, and it looks kind of ridiculous. But overall, she's okay. It doesn't surprise me she hasn't been in a ton of movies. Um, and Tony Perez as Fernando Garcia. He's basically our main villain, kinda, but he's nothing really special, but he's not doing a terrible job acting. But here's the thing. This film, Isaac Florentine is a director. I have to talk about him. Isaac Florentine is an action director. He's basically one of the big reasons that Millennium Entertainment, one of the biggest indie film production, especially independent action films, production companies of all time. He is a big reason why they have popped off so well because he directed Undisputed 2, Undisputed 3, or no, he didn't do Boyka. He did Ninja 1 and 2, he did Acts of Vengeance, um, Shepherd Border Patrol, Bridge of Dragons. He has done so much for this fucking company with all these classics. Special Forces as well. I'm can't wait to see his next film, Hounds of War, which I'm guessing Frank Grillo is going to be the main character, which, fuck yeah, I can't wait for that. And possibly Robert Patrick as the villain. Also, Rona Mitra's in there. Interesting. But he is a fantastic action director. Even if I haven't 100% loved all of his films, he knows what he's doing. And anyone saying that he's like a beginner or he's an amateur, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Given the budget this film was made on, it should look like shit. But it doesn't. This film was made on a $3 million budget, and it has better looking action than many $100 million movies. I'm not joking. And that's because most of these $100 million movies barely spend any time thinking about the action, and it's mostly just CGI that they've barely paid the CG artists to implement. And here you get practical action, and I will explain what makes this film's action stick out, like against all these other films. But Isaac Florentine knows how to shoot action. He knows to show it and not cut every half a second because it feels like you don't know what you're doing. To me, him actually showing the action shows that, oh, they actually put work into this. They actually built out this fight scene, and sometimes so that you could fight two people at once, which takes a lot more effort and a lot more skill to do that well. And Scott Adkins, again, it wouldn't surprise me if Scott Adkins makes up a lot of his own fights because he's so fucking skilled at it. He probably knows off the back of his head how a fight is going to go down. But Scott Adkins is a lot of what makes this film, and Scott Adkins and both Isaac Florentine and Jesse V. Johnson are dynamic duos to be reckoned with because when they're working together, they are making some of their best work. Jesse V. Johnson with Scott Adkins made Accident Man and Avengement, both fantastic action films, and Isaac Florentine with Scott Adkins made this film, the Undisputed films, which are considered some of his best. I have not seen them yet. I need to watch the first one, which is a Walter Hill film, which I'm open to. I like Walter Hill. And this and Shepherd Border Patrol. What else? I think he did one. Oh yeah, Ninja 2, one of Isaac Florentine's best so far that I've seen. They are dynamic duos. They really are. And here, even though this film is not perfect, and I'll get to why, it is a hell of a lot of fun. First off, biggest plus I can give this film is it does not outstay its welcome. It is 85 minutes, almost on the dot. Without credits, it's about 79, 80 minutes. So an hour and 20 minutes about without credits. And this film gets down to it. It sets up enough. It has a nice action scene at the beginning, nice bit like 20 minutes of setup, and then the rest of the film is straight action. Not every movie needs to be that way. It does have small moments in between the action scenes to kind of level things out and make it so that the action doesn't get too much so that it doesn't become boring. And I like that. It does the same kind of thing that Hard Boiled, my personal favorite action movie, did at points during it, where it would, in the second half, which basically became an hour of nonstop action, they would have small interludes of character interactions, character moments, building of tension, and it really worked for that film. And I think that's why a lot of these Marvel movies where they get into like hour-long battles, they don't know how to do that because again, these characters here, like in Hard Boiled, are not superhuman. The main character of this film sustains damage, and I think Scott Adkins is one of the better people for that because there are martial arts films with better action scenes. But a lot of them forget one thing, that the main character is a human and that they either one forget to give them a personality, two they make them dry as fuck, or three they forget to have them at least get hurt at some point. That's the issue with a lot of Steven Seagal's movies. His later movies, though, where his fat ass is moving around chopping guys, but he never gets a hit on him, almost never, because well, it's in his contract that he can't lose a fight, uh, and there's a ton of stuff in his contracts, but that's for another day. But Scott Adkins understands how to, excuse me, he understands how to make this character likable, gruff, badass, and real. He knows how to make the character fun and interesting. Even though you don't know like everything about his backstory, you get the bare minimum and that's enough for you. You don't need a big long monologue about how badass he is. And again, if a few things with this film could have been changed, I'd say you'd have a pretty nice classic film on your hands, classic action film at least. And I feel the reason people didn't give films like this much of a chance is because they go on all that bullshit about, oh, there's not enough story. If there's too much action, it's not a good film. I've legitimately heard people make the argument that there are films with so much action that they immediately become bad because there's not enough story. Saying that films like Raiders of the Lost Ark, if there were a couple less action scenes and more character building scenes, it'll be a better film, which is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. An action movie is meant to deliver action and deliver an exciting story, and this film does that. Now, what I was saying about the action again, the action is a mixture of martial arts and uh, gunfights, which from this cover, you might be a little misled. They're showing like what looks like somebody with a helmet, as if there would be like a biker that he fights. He doesn't fight any bikers, but this is basically a neo-western slash action movie. And from the soundtrack, which the score is really good. The score to this film is really good for the most part. It has some moments where it uses stock sound effects. It uses the thing from SpongeBob. Um, but I've heard that in a million other movies. It's not a knock at the movie, but I think they could have used a different sound effect. But the music is good. It really works with the style of action they're going for. Um, especially the last like hour straight of this movie is just like a siege movie. Um, or the last 50 to 40 to 50 minutes of this movie is a 45 to 50 minutes of this movie is a straight up siege movie. And It it culminates in this house getting pretty fucking shot up, and you can tell that it's actually happening, which really involves me into the action. It doesn't feel like, oh, there's a bunch of CGI bullet holes or whatever, which a lot of big budget movies do nowadays, even though with the bigger budget, you should be able to do more practical shit, more practical explosions, more practical gunfights, more practical martial arts. But no, they choose to cheat it because all the money that they're spending is going to the actors' paychecks. But here again, when these cartel members are shooting at the house, you feel it. You can feel it feels real whenever somebody gets shot. It's not shitty looking CGI blood like a lot of low budget films and even high budget films love to use. It is they are practical blood squibs. And this is something I'm always for. Practical blood squibs, no CGI, and plenty of explosions. And while this film isn't exactly explosion heavy, there are a couple pretty decent explosions here that are practical. And it shows that you do not need a high budget in order to use practical effects. You don't. There is a reason why a lot of directors starting out back in the 60s, 70s and 80s used practical effects, and it's because that's one, that's all they had, and two, there were ways to get around them. And nowadays people see CGI as a way around having to do actual work, and then they end up underpaying the CGI artists. But yeah, like the action of this film is very, very, very well done. And if I was grading this film in the action alone, I'd easily give it a 9 because it is very engaging. There's a nice sound design. There's a fight scene with Scott Adkins and this other guy, and he's got a knife. It's very fast paced. Scott Adkins is very good with the raid type fights, um, where the speed is just insane. Again, just really engaging. The sound design really kills it. Um, you've got kind of a John Woo-esque feel to the action too, where people are jumping at times. There's a bit where Scott Adkins jumps over a stair railing shooting at a guy. There's like papers and plates getting destroyed, which is something I'm always for. Um, Reacting with the environment, shooting something in the environment and it explodes, that kind of thing. There's a pile of papers that gets shot and the papers are flying everywhere in slow motion. It's very well done stuff. Very homage to John Woo, and I can tell that John Woo is a big inspiration of Isaac Florentine, especially if you've seen High Voltage, which I would say I'd watch High Voltage over this, but still, you can tell it's an inspiration. And what I said about the sister character, she actually gets in on the action too. She's not a martial artist. They don't try to make it a badass female. It's more that she's forced to help her brother protect her home, and she gets off some nice shots. And I think they did it in the best way they could, because I think forcing a strong female character is one of the dumbest things you can do, especially if it doesn't work. And they didn't really force a strong female character. It's really a female character. So I wish more movies knew how to do this, because this film did it well and the character came off legitimately badass because it wasn't insinuating that it wasn't yelling at me, "Oh, find this badass." I just found it badass because it was like, "Oh shit, this is a mom willing to protect her daughter." It's not a badass female character, it is simply a female character doing what must be done. But anyways, the things that I do have an issue with this movie. There are small bits of CGI that I'm not a big fan of. Um, Again, Madison Lawler and Caitlin Keats, you could do without them. You could pick better actors. Um, maybe maybe I wish there was a little bit more character development with certain characters. Even though I'm fine with nonstop action, I'm perfectly fine with that. But I don't know, maybe divide it up a little bit more, space it out a bit more throughout the movie. Um, Again, the use of some stock sound effects did kind of distract me at times. And again, the villain isn't really all that special. Neither of the villains are really all that special or anything you haven't seen before. They are kind of stock. But still, I do recommend if people are into martial arts films, if people are especially into Scott Adkins, definitely give this a watch if you haven't. And I think you won't be disappointed. I think you'll at least have a fun 80 or so minutes. But yeah, that was my review of Close Range. If you've seen this film, let me know what you thought in the comments. If you have any recommendations, put those in the comments as well. And move reviewer next door.